Did Pontius Pilate write a report to Roman Emperor Tiberius about Jesus, including accounts of his miracles, his trial, crucifixion, and resurrection? Does this report contain amazing details not even found in the Gospels? That's what we're talking about today, and we're starting right now. A document exists known as the Acts of Pilate. It was first contained in an apocryphal book, the Acts of Peter and Paul, said to be written in the 1st century. But it was included intact as an earlier, original document, supposedly from Pilate himself. It was also then included in a 4th century apocryphal book, the Gospel of Nicodemus. But is it a factual account? Or a factual account that was embellished a little by Christians, or totally fabricated? Scholars are divided. Some ancient writers believe that Pilate did send such a report. And it makes some sense, as in the report, Pilate indicates that Herod Antipas was speaking badly of Pilate to Caesar, and Pilate wanted to defend himself before the emperor. That is a logical reason to have written a report. And one must ask if anyone fabricating a report would have added a detail like this. It really seems unlikely. In AD 138, Justin Martyr, the early church father, wrote to Roman Emperor Antonius Pius and referred him to Pilate's report, these exact words, this exact report. This is a key piece of evidence. Obviously, the report was common knowledge in and around 150 AD and was preserved in the imperial archives in Rome in order for the Emperor Pius to have been able to have read it. Here is part of what Justin Martyr wrote to Caesar. But the words, "They pierced my hands and my feet," are a description of the nails that were fixed in his hands and his feet on the cross. And after he was crucified, those who crucified him cast lots for his garments and divided them among themselves. And that these things were so, you may learn from the Acts, which were recorded under Pontius Pilate. That he performed these miracles, you may easily be satisfied from the Acts of Pontius Pilate. Another church father, Tertullian, relayed an account that Tiberius Caesar even tried to have Jesus added to the Roman pantheon of gods based on Pilate's report. Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know. There is no record of it in the Roman archives, but it does show that at least early Christians held the Acts of Pilate in high regard. Not only did Christians hold it in high regard, but the enemies of the cross did as well. The emperor, Maximin, in AD 311, faked a forged version of the Acts of Pilate just to discredit the original version and Christianity. He distributed the forgery and even made it required study in the schools at that time. Now, why would an emperor require this type of forged ancient history to be studied unless the original Acts of Pilate were having a great effect throughout the empire? So I really want to share this document with our community in a multi-part series, all released within a day of each other so that you can watch one episode after another. I will be reading Pilate's words and commenting on them as we work through this letter to Caesar. If this type of analysis of historical records is important to you, consider joining us by subscribing. So the letter begins like this. Pontius Pilate to the Emperor Tiberius, greeting. Recent events in my province have been of such a character that I thought I would give the details as they have occurred, as I should not be surprised in the course of time they may change the destiny of our nation, for it seems of late that the gods have ceased to be propitious. I am almost ready to say, cursed be the day that I succeeded Valerius Gratus in the government of Judea. It seemed to me, of all conquered cities, Jerusalem was the most difficult to govern. So turbulent were the people that I lived in momentary dread of an insurrection. To suppress it, I had but a single centurion and a handful of soldiers. I requested a reinforcement from the prefect of Syria, who informed me that he had scarcely troops sufficient to defend his own province. An instate thirst for conquest, to extend our empire beyond the means of defending it, I fear will be the means of destroying our noble empire. Those were the words of Pontius Pilate. But we need to stop right here and think about what this document is saying. Pilate is indicating to Caesar that Jerusalem was defended by a single centurion and his cohort, which usually was only 100 soldiers. There is a very popular theory in America that the Temple Mount had to be the Antonia fortress and that the true temple was in the city of David. The reason given is that only the Temple Mount area was large enough to house the 6,000 soldiers of the 10th Roman Legion that they assume were in Jerusalem. Well, according to Pilate, the number of soldiers in Jerusalem was much smaller than what Americans have assumed, even if he was underestimating his numbers to the emperor. And as we will see, that as the document unfolds, this lack of troops was a major reason that Pilate chose to have Jesus crucified. Now, let's get back to Pilate's words. Among the various rumors that came to my ears, there was one that attracted my attention in particular. A young man, it was said, had appeared in Galilee, preaching with a noble unction a new law, in the name of the gods that had sent him. At first, I was apprehensive about his design to stir up the people against the Romans, but soon my fears were dispelled. Jesus of Nazareth spake rather as a friend of the Romans than of the Jews. One day, in passing by the place of Silo, where there was a great concourse of people, I observed in the midst of the group a young man who was leaning against a tree, calmly addressing the multitude. I was told it was Jesus. This I could easily have suspected, so great was the difference between him and those who were listening to him. His golden-colored hair and beard gave to his appearance a celestial aspect. He appeared to be about 30 years of age. Never have I seen a sweeter or more serene countenance. What a contrast between him and his hearers with their black beards and tawny complexion. Okay, we need to comment on this as well because I believe this is the only recorded explanation of Jesus' appearance in all of historical documents. And notice it lists him as being blonde. Was this added to the document? Or did Jesus truly have lighter colored hair and beard than his contemporaries? My guess is it's an add-on by those who copied this document over the years, but we don't know. It's certainly intriguing. Now, back to Pilate. Unwilling to interrupt him by my presence, I continued my walk, but signified to my secretary to join the group and listen. My secretary's name was Manulus. He was the grandson of the chief of the conspirators who encamped in Etruria waiting Catalina. Manulus was an ancient inhabitant of Judea and well acquainted with the Hebrew language. He was devoted to me and worthy of my confidence. On entering the praetorium, I found Manulus, who related to me the words that Jesus had pronounced at Silo. Never have I heard in the Pedico, nor in the works of the philosophers, anything that can compare to the maxims of Jesus. One of the rebellious Jews, so numerous in Jerusalem, having asked him if it was lawful to give tribute to Caesar, Jesus replied, "Render unto Caesar the things which belong to Caesar, and unto God the things that are God's." It was on account of the wisdom of this saying that I granted so much liberty to the Nazarene, for it was in my power to have him arrested and exiled to Pontus. But this would have been contrary to the justice which has always characterized the Romans. The man was neither seditious nor rebellious. I extended to him my protection, unknown perhaps to himself. He was at liberty to act, to speak, to assemble, and address the people and to choose disciples unrestrained by any Praetorian mandate. Okay, we need to stop and do a reality check. This section seems very real to me. From the details about the servant, to choosing the exact teaching of Jesus that would please the Romans the most, and even explaining why he didn't arrest Jesus sooner. But then we read this. Should it ever happen, may the gods ever avert the omen. Should it ever happen, I say, that the religion of our forefathers be supplanted by the religion of Jesus, it will be to this noble toleration that Rome shall owe her premature obliquities, while I, miserable wretch, shall have been the instrument of what the Hebrews call providence and we call destiny. Okay, let's comment on this section as well. Here is one aspect I find out of character. Would Pilate have really said this to Caesar? The elimination of the ancient religion? I mean, it was almost blasphemous, in their religious thinking. So maybe not. This is a section that may have been an add-on, or perhaps Pilate had already become a Christian at this point. We won't know for sure. Okay, so let's get back to Pilate. But this unlimited freedom granted to Jesus provoked the Jews, not the poor, but the rich and powerful. It is true that Jesus was severe on the latter, and this was a political reason, in my opinion, not to control the liberty of a Nazarene. Scribes and Pharisees, he would say to them, "You are a race of vipers. You resemble painted sepulchres." At other times, he would sneer at the proud alms of the publican, telling him the mite of the poor widow was more precious in the sight of God. New complaints were daily made at the Praetorium against the insolence of Jesus. I was even informed that some misfortune would befall him, that it would not be the first time that Jerusalem had stoned those who called themselves prophets, and that if the Praetorium refused justice, an appeal would be made to Caesar. However, my conduct was approved by the Senate, and I was promised a reinforcement after the termination of the Parthian War. Being too weak to suppress a sedition, I resolved upon adopting a measure that promised to establish the tranquility of the city without subjecting the Praetorium to humiliating concession. Now, this part of the report also rings so true to me. I can see how Pilate felt caught between his fear of a rebellion and a possible appeal to Caesar and his desire to do the right thing. So Pilate indicates he asked Jesus to come to him for a secret meeting. Although not recorded in the Gospels, might a meeting like this have taken place? Well, click right here to keep watching part 2 of this exciting series on Pilate and learn what Pilate and Jesus might have talked about and the prophecy that Jesus gave Pilate, according to this account. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.